The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We're going to go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is Dr. Levine. A lot of you know me as the Digital Dentist. I wanted to welcome everyone to our ongoing The Digital Dentist webinar series. I think we've got a great topic tonight. We had close to 200 people that were registered as of this morning. I see a good number of people are already here. I'm only going to talk for a couple of minutes at first. I want to make sure that we give Rohit a chance to make sure that he has as much time as he would like to go through the slides and the information that we have tonight. Most of you have been on previous webinars. For those of you who aren't familiar with the format, on your screen you should have a little GoToWebinar control panel, and you can go ahead and type in your questions as you think about them. Depending on where we're at in the presentation, depending on what Rohit's talking about, I typically don't interrupt him a lot while he's talking, but if a question comes in that's relevant to a slide that he's on, I may just go ahead and interrupt him to make sure we get that question answered. But one of the things we really pride ourselves on is the ability to get to all the questions at the end of the webinar. So we will take those questions in the order that we get them. When you log out tonight, you're going to have a real short survey. It's 2 questions. Basically, do you want me to follow up with you, or do you want Rohit to follow up with you? And just click one or both of those, and one of us will follow up with you. Also, even though I don't think we advertise this in the invitations that went out, we are able to provide AGD Pay CE for this particular webinar. I typically charge for it. I'm not going to do that tonight, so you're all going to get an hour and a half of CE as well. The other thing is, for those of you who have not been on past webinars, I do record all my webinars. So if by some reason you can't stay towards the end, or you've got to take care of your kids or whatever, don't worry about it. Normally that goes out no later than 24 hours. I should be able to get it out tonight, so you should get a copy of the recording tonight as well as the CE form. And of course, if you have any questions, you certainly know where to find me. As I said, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Levine. I did practice as a periodontist for 10 years. It really was not my true love. My true love has been technology, and I work with offices all over the country. Over the last 14 years, it's kind of evolved. Initially, it was mostly computers and networks and things like that. We still do a lot of that for our clients. A number of years ago, we started doing a lot of services, backup and disaster recovery, network monitoring, antivirus software. And over the last couple of years, especially since last year when the omnibus rules went into effect for HIPAA, I've really been focusing a lot on HIPAA, high-tech omnibus rules, and helping practices to get compliance. The topic for this evening is we're going to talk about email. And the fact of the matter is, most dentists, when they're communicating with other offices, with referring offices, are using email. And I think one of the things that we want to try to get across tonight is that if you are going to do it, you got to make sure you are doing this in the proper way. There are a number of HIPAA rules and regulations related to sending what's called EPHI, Electronic Protected Health Information. But I think the approach that we want to take tonight is to start thinking about the fact, well, is this really the right thing to be doing? I mean, there's so many risks here, and there's a lot of reasons why this may not be the ideal way to communicate with other offices, and we're going to hit on those topics tonight. Now, I would not go so far as to call myself a HIPAA expert by any stretch of the imagination. I do have a certification. It's called a Certified HIPAA Security Professional. I'm going to a conference on Sunday in San Diego for to get more certifications and get more training on HIPAA. It's called the Healthcare Compliance group that I'm going to be at. But the good news for those of you on the webinar tonight is that I'm joined by Rohit Joshi, who we've done a number of webinars together in the past, and I just love working with Rohit. He is, one of the things with HIPAA is that there are so many gray areas and so much confusion out there, and there are HIPAA experts all over the country who will probably put you to sleep in the first 5 minutes of talking with them because they're really focusing on the minute details of everything. But the fact is, I think most dentists and dental offices just want good practical advice. You know, what is the standard of care here? What are we supposed to be doing? I mean, yeah, you can stretch the definitions out, but the fact is that dental offices, you know, we're all going to struggle to become HIPAA compliant, and certainly my company, we're considered a business associate. We have to be compliant as well. But Rohit has held senior executive positions with life science and technology companies in the U.S. and Canada. He really focuses on using technology for effective communications. He's got every degree you can probably think of. He's got a bachelor's in molecular biology, he's got a master's in medical science, and he's got a bachelor's degree in law. So he definitely hits on a lot of those bases. So what I want to do at this point is turn the screen over to him. And the mic as well, and Rohit, as always, looking forward to tonight's presentation, and take it away.
Thanks very much, Dr. Levine. It's, as always, a real pleasure to work with you on these webinars. I think we've had a pretty good success in terms of just trying to make sure that we're giving a lot of good advice, and would encourage everyone to ask as many questions as they have time for, and of course we'll try to answer as many as we can during the webinar tonight, and we'll also be following up with answers to every single one of those questions within the next few days. It usually takes us a few days just to answer them all, but we're really lucky to be in this time, in this place, to talk about HIPAA. I think there's quite a bit of new information that continues to come out about HIPAA. But in fact, I think some of the principles are very simple. So today what we're going to try to do is talk about the 3 reasons why you should never use email to communicate with patients or colleagues. And those who've attended previous webinars will know that this is a passion of mine and of our companies, is trying to increase effective communication. And so we've got quite a bit to say about that. And certainly the best way that we've found in getting our message across is to educate and inform. We're going to start by talking about the patient privacy laws. There's HIPAA, there's high-tech, there's the omnibus rules, as well as PIPEDA, which is a Canadian legislation which has, broadly speaking, the same sort of principles. We're then going to delve a little bit into the business repercussions of what might happen if you have a breach. And what I mean by a breach I'll explain, but it has to do with the loss of patient information. What happens to your business? And we've got some interesting statistics that we've been able to find about the repercussions that the business may suffer, and part of that is a loss of reputation because you have to inform your patients. Finally, we will talk about how using email will lower the standard of communication for your practice. And so we're going to talk a bit about an alternative service called Secure Mail that we're happy to bring to you. As Dr. Levine mentioned, this is a series of a number of webinars that we've done together. We've been quite happy to make these available on our website, past webinars. I think if those of you are hearing this information for the first time or attending one of our webinars, I'd actually start with the top. If you see the very top image there, we've got a webinar there called Your First 3 Steps to HIPAA Compliance. And what you'll see in that webinar is where we think your practice should start. We think there's lots of good information, and you can certainly continue on through the series, but I would encourage you to start there. With the webinar package that you can download from our website, we'll show you all of the webinar videos for sure. You can easily view those. We also provide answers to all the questions that were asked during the hour and a half. We'll provide you with a HIPAA compliance checklist and software checklist as well for those people who are using companies like ours to manage HIPAA compliance. We'll include a business associates agreement and notice of privacy practices. And we've been asked before, there is no charge for this. I think we really see this as a value add and appreciate the time that you're all spending with us. What you'd want to do is enter series in the place where you'd normally be asking your questions into the toolbar that you have for the webinar. Just enter the word series and we'll send all that to you, so you've got links and to all of that information that we'll email to you. So without any more delay, let's start talking a little bit about the privacy laws, HIPAA, high-tech, and PIPEDA. The first thing to recognize is that sometimes, I know for many people, it starts to feel like acronym soup. We've got something called HIPAA, a modification to that, which took effect September 23rd, 2013, called HIPAA Omnibus Guidelines. There's another modification that happened a few years ago called the high-tech regulations. And in Canada, there's something called the PIPEDA regulations, which are similar in nature to the HIPAA legislation. I will say, though, that we watch the HIPAA legislation very, very carefully because I think out of all of the legislation that we look at, the HIPAA legislation is the most detailed in terms of what's required for electronic protected health information. Protected health information is all of those pieces of patient information that are individually identifiable. So those are the ones that really start to determine what needs to be protected and what we need to ensure that there's continued privacy on.
Hey, Rose,
so, sorry, yes, sir.
If I could just, kind of belabor that point just for a second here, because I get this question asked a lot. People say, well, I want to send regular emails to my referring offices, but I'll just remove some of the information there. That protected health information, the ADA has identified, I believe, 16 different things that fall into that category, and it's everything. It's the name, it's initials, it's a chart ID, it's their address, it's a full facial shot. Any information on there that someone could look at and say, yeah, I think I know who that is considered identifiable information, and that has to be protected. So you can't get away just by sending an email with a patient chart number or their initials or their first name. I mean, you're still going to get yourself into trouble.
That's exactly our interpretation as well. We found that, depending on where you look on the internet, people will make a case to say what is identifiable and what isn't. Frankly speaking, I tend to be pretty conservative in these matters because that's not a fight that you want to have, right? It's not worth the fight to say our initials identifiable. In my view, anything that could be probably is. And it's better to take a conservative approach, so you just don't have to deal with it. But you're exactly right. This it's a challenge that comes up. But to be honest, Dr. Levine, I'm seeing it less and less. I think this was something maybe 3 years ago that people challenged whether or not there was something that was it individually identifiable health information. I'm saying, what I'm seeing is people just generally saying, yeah, it probably is. So one of the things I found valuable when first starting this lecture series was really to define the fact that the HIPAA requirements really are there to maintain doctor-patient confidentiality. I think it's very easy to become over-regulated, and I think typically small business people, dentists, and other practice owners tend to feel pretty regulated. When I look at HIPAA, I tend to take a different approach. I take the approach that it's really about ensuring that doctor-patient confidentiality exists. And it's that trust that the patient shares with the doctor. I think what I've learned after speaking with hundreds and thousands, really now, of dentists, is that once they understand how information can leak out of the practice or get lost out of the practice, people usually, most of the practice owners that I meet, are pretty concerned about that information getting out. And so I like to take it back to really first principles in that sense of the confidentiality. Now, one of the big questions that we started answering about a few years ago now is really trying to understand why email is not compliant, because quite frankly, it should be compliant. If I'm addressing an email to Dr. Levine, the expectation is I've put an address in the to field, and I hit send, and he gets it, and nobody else is going to see it in between that. And people tend to use the analogy of an envelope because it's kind of like mail, and I understand why that confusion exists. The challenge, though, and the reason it's not compliant, is because in the path from coming from my outbox to Dr. Levine's inbox, it passes through a number of unsecured servers. Because neither Dr. Levine owns those servers nor I own those servers, it can be intercepted and read at any station in between. And that's the big challenge. So even though I might think at the front end of the message that I've got a secure computer and I'm addressing it and I'm being very careful who I address it to, the fact is that the nature of the Internet does not allow that message to be transferred securely. The problem with that, of course, is that to maintain patient confidentiality, to ensure that that information that we've held so tightly in our offices gets to where it needs to get to, it needs to be secure. As far as the rest of the requirements for HIPAA, you know, there's hundreds of pages of good documentation that someone could go through, but frankly, not a lot of people find it fun other than me. So in very short form, I would say people are typically understand that information needs to be encrypted. And from our point of view, encryption is a good start. It's a good first step towards HIPAA compliance. And basically what encryption is it takes that protected health information that could be sitting on your computer or sent by email, and it puts it against, it runs it through a mathematical formula that renders it unusable until someone decrypts it. And so it's a very, very good first step towards HIPAA compliance. From a HIPAA compliant standpoint, there's also many other things, though, that we have to be able to do. For example, we have to have, there's data access provisions, off-site backup provisions, and recovery test provisions. Just to quickly talk about those things, we want to be able to restore that information. So the off-site backup becomes critical. So if all of your data is sitting in your office, it's not good enough. You need to have an on-site backup, and that's a regulated part of the HIPAA compliance. Further, you should, on a regular basis, test that recovery. Make sure you can get that information back if push comes to shove. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the story of, I thought it was being backed up. And I'm sure many of you on the call probably have heard the same thing, whether it's from a personal perspective or a business perspective. People are diligent, they set up the backup process, and what they come to realize in a very troubling time is that the backup wasn't working, or it wasn't effective for what people expected it was doing. Now, there are many services that we all use, whether it's Outlook or Apple Mail or Gmail, Hotmail, Dropbox, or SkyDrive. I guess they've just changed, Microsoft has just changed that name from SkyDrive now to OneDrive. And quite definitively, these services are not HIPAA compliant. Now, Gmail is an interesting one because as a starting point, Gmail is free for anybody who wants it. The reason that it is free is because they make their money by scanning your email and advertising to you on the basis of the content of that email. So you can take security and throw it out the window because Google itself is reading your mail. The second part of it, it's not auditable or secure because you've got machines and individuals that are able to go into your email and selectively market to you on that basis. Hotmail is very much the same thing. Dropbox, I don't even have to make the case. If you go to Dropbox, you will see that they specifically state that they do not have HIPAA certifications. And the same is true of SkyDrive or OneDrive. These are not HIPAA compliant services. So I'm going to take just a few more slides, and I've taken a bunch of the questions that Dr. Levine and I have been asked over the past number of webinars, and I thought I'd just take a few slides and just kind of go over those for everybody's benefit. The first one is, can I get consent to use email with my patients? If you do the search on the Health and Human Services website, you will see a yes. Yes, you can get consent to use email. There are a few provisions, though, that you need to be careful of. First of all, You need to be explained the risks associated with traditional email. So you need to be able to, or your front desk, or the people at the front desk who are speaking with the patient, need to be able to explain those risks. My suggestion is, although it's not regulated, my suggestion is you need to get a written consent from your patients for you to use that email address. And Dr. Levine, I know you and I have had these discussions before. I think written consent is a mandatory thing in this situation, because the last thing you want to do is have a discussion that's your patient saying that they didn't know, and you're saying that you actually are sure that you told them about the risks.
Yeah,
so that's
had a conversation there with a friend of mine who's a dentist up in Idaho who was being sued from a patient, and the main basis of that suit is that they said they were not informed of what they needed to do. So it's kind of a combination here between what most dentists know as informed consent, but it has to be modified to be a consent for the emails as well. But absolutely, you've got to cover your rear end, unfortunately. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen,
unfortunately,
exactly.
From a legal standpoint.
Yeah, and it's starting to get more that way, isn't it? So just make sure you have that written consent, and within that consent, make sure that you have those words that explain that risk through traditional email. Now, just to clarify, although the patient can give you consent to do that, your practice is still at risk. So many people, when they're sending emails, are sending them from their computers, or it synchronizes with their tablet or their phones or some other laptop device. If a data breach occurs because that phone went missing, or the tablet went missing, or someone stole the laptop or computer system, you are still in breach. So even though the patient said it was okay, the patients received it, they can't come back to you. You have to be very careful, because that's still sitting in your sent items folder somewhere. So if you're using a synchronization of any sort that goes from your office computer to your phone or to your tablet or whatever, your practice is still at risk, and you need to make sure that those elements are encrypted, backed up, and all of that list of things that I previously mentioned. Or, of course, you can use secure mail, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The second question we, of course, get is, can I get a consent to use email with my colleagues? So the question really is, can a patient consent for me to be able to share their information with another professional? In fact, patients cannot consent to that. Those are covered directly by the HIPAA laws, because you've got one practice communicating with another practice. And it's a duty of that relationship to be able to store that information in a HIPAA compliant way. The patient may think it's okay, but the laws demand that you do not. And the last question I'll just answer, because we do see it come up quite a few times, is, well, what about patient appointment reminders? How does that fare with HIPAA? Well, in fact, patient appointment reminders are fine. You can send basic generic information through text or through email that talks about when their appointment is. You would want to make sure, though, that you don't include in that any medication information or anything that's specific to the medical condition of that patient. That's where it crosses the line from being a generic reminder into leaking that patient information. And that's just, it's a nuance, but again, it's something that we just want to be very clear about, because there is so much gray area in these discussions. So there have already been cases where long phone messages were left reminding someone that they had an appointment, but also disclosing at the time sensitive treatment information. That's a no-no. The second is texting. Again, it's okay, but again, do not disclose sensitive treatment information, like medications they should or shouldn't take before showing up. With email, the same thing applies. Make sure not to disclose any sensitive treatment information because, again, it's unsecure. And also, secondarily, with email, make sure that your patients can unsubscribe. That's just one of those good practices that you should have. Now, without getting into too much of the doom and gloom, Dr. Levine, I thought we'd spend a little bit of time just talking about what's been happening. You know, I picked a few recent examples of the type of fines that are occurring for HIPAA, and it's important to talk a bit about the fines in this section. I think only because we're going to recognize a couple of things. The first thing we're going to recognize is that there's no HIPAA cop. There's no one who's going to come on the door, come to your practice's door, knock on it, and say, "I'm here to do my HIPAA audit." I just don't think that's going to happen. Now, it could, but they're going to focus on other much larger organizations. At least that's my take. There is definitely funding for organizations to go do audits, but I think if you look at these examples and what I've found over the past 3 or 4 years of looking, most of the audits are going to be triggered by another event. So let's start with the adult and pediatric dermatology private practice in Massachusetts. This happened in December, a few months ago. There was a $150,000 settlement, and they were forced to do an action plan. The problem here was that it was an unencrypted USB drive. Now, most of us, of course, use USB drives quite freely. There's 2,200 patients and this USB drive was stolen from a vehicle of one of the employees that worked at the dermatology private practice. This one got fined $150,000 because they did not have policies and procedures in place on what to do with sensitive information. So not only were they negligent in not having their USB drive encrypted, but it goes a step further than that. They didn't actually have any policies in place. And we're going to see that a bit as a theme. The second one is the Shasta Regional Medical Center, and this is in California. June 2013, less than a year ago, there's a $275,000 settlement and a corrective action plan. This was an interesting case for me. I just thought I'd share it because it was really there was two senior executives that discussed the patient protected health information with two media outlets in response to a media story. Essentially, the media story was one where there was something to do with Medicare fraud, where the hospital had seemingly billed for treating a patient for malnutrition, but in fact, the patient said the patient was overweight and indicated that she hadn't received this type of treatment. So it became this big media event. There was two senior executives who disclosed that information to two media outlets, and then went back to the office, if you can believe this, and sent an email to all of their employees explaining their position, saying this is the facts of the case. Well, that landed them a $275,000 fine. Pretty interesting because it was only about one patient, but the magnitude of what happened was big, and therefore they were levied with this pretty big fine. The last one is that I've got here. I selectively chose a couple of these. Was the Hospice of Northern Idaho. Happened January 2nd. At least that's when the press release was. A $50,000 fine and corrective action plan. This was an unencrypted laptop, and it was stolen. It had 441 patient information. Now, the reason this one was interesting was it's the largest fine that's been levied for that number of patients. So with only 441 patients' information being lost, they were fined $50,000. And the reason, again, was, of course, the laptop was unencrypted, but secondarily, there wasn't any risk analysis, no policies, no procedures. I'm not going to spend any more time talking about fines because I find it depressing. And quite frankly, if they would have taken, if any one of these organizations would have taken some time with their staff to review their policies, or even just to assign a project manager in place and start down that road of the type of things that we've got covered in your first 3 steps webinar that we mentioned earlier, If they'd just done that, they would be so much further ahead. So it doesn't mean that people have to do a lot of work, but it's definitely an incentive to get started.
I wanted to add one other thing, if I could.
Absolutely.
I agree with you that people should not be worried about the HIPAA police showing up at their door. However, many people may remember that back in 2012, the OCR, Office of Civil Rights, had allocated $12 million to do 150 random audits of all practices, medical, dental, whatever. They did nothing last year, but they just announced in February of this year that they're going to be sending out 1,200 surveys to various practitioners around the country, and based on the response of those surveys will determine if there's going to be a follow-up audit. So people, I agree with what you said, but I don't think people should necessarily think that they're out of the woods, that there's no chance of anything happening, because Health and Human Services definitely is still on top of this. It's not like, okay, we passed this and we're not going to have to worry about it.
Yeah, you're right. It's actually, I didn't know that information around the questionnaires. That'll be interesting to see what the results of that are. Now, everything that I've covered here in the fines, we really look at in terms, it's kind of like getting a speeding ticket. You were doing something wrong, and now you were fined, you have to go pay your fine. I think that the more troubling aspects of HIPAA compliance are the fact that there's further business repercussions, right? The loss of your reputation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now, just a handful of slides, to talk about not just a fine, which is like getting a speeding ticket and you pay your fine. It's actually what does that do to your practice, and where does that put you? So let's start with a slide which talks about how dental practices actually have been affected. It looks like there's over 200,000 individuals now, like patients, that are affected by some HIPAA breach. Now, if you look at this information, between 2009 and 2013, you can start to see, if you go down the list, that theft is the largest reason. The second one is loss, right at the bottom. Now, what's interesting about this data is that there wasn't anyone knocking at the door. This is a breach that resulted as a result of something pretty normal happening. We've all had examples where we know somebody's cell phone was lost or a laptop was stolen. And once those things get started, even though it's not your fault, it triggers a series of events around the breach. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. So first of all, just the definition of a breach, of a data breach, is when someone's protected health information, your patients, it goes missing. It's disclosed, and it compromises security and privacy of that information. Now, once that laptop gets stolen, once your cell phone gets lost, once one of those elements happens, and that information hasn't been encrypted, or it is still accessible somehow or another, here's what you have to do. The first is you have to provide everyone that has been affected in your practice, everybody who's lost patient information, everyone needs to be notified. The second, so there's obviously a big challenge. I know that in one of the cases of a dentist that has come to us recently, he was affected. His database was 6,000 individuals, and he had to contact each one of those individuals and let them know that their protected health information, their personal health information, had been compromised. The second is you have to then also make some sort of a media notice. So if more than 500 people are affected, in addition to notifying people individually, you actually have to publish something in a newspaper that says our information was compromised, and be careful, beware. Obviously, notice to the secretary, who manages all of these nationally. And the last thing on this list is notification by a business associate. So if some of you have business associates that work with you, and business associate's a defined term in HIPAA, which is someone who's outside of your practice but has access to your patient information. The last provision here is that if they lose some of the data, they have to notify you. And ultimately, though, they are responsible to notify everybody else that there has been compromise, that patient information has been compromised. Now, to get a little more real about this again, we know that 1 in 5 email accounts gets hacked. 113 cell phones are lost or stolen every minute. 57% of us replace or misplace our cell phones, and over 12,000 laptops are lost each week in U.S. airports. Pretty interesting statistics, and as I said before, really the starting point of a lot of the HIPAA breaches happens because this information has been lost or stolen. Now, there's an interesting study. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there's an interesting study that just came out last week. It was put on by Symantec, which is a very large security firm globally. And what they did was they put 60 phones in various public locations in multiple cities. Well, the good news was that 50% of them got returned to their sender. Now, 50% of them never came back, but 50% did get returned. The problem with it is that 93% of them got probed before they were sent back. So even though 50% made them back, almost 100% of them were probed. And what do I mean when they were probed? People checked them out for banking information, corporate information, passwords, photos, emails. Everything was accessed in order to gain more information. So, you know, when they did the study, they said, well, maybe people were just looking for, trying to figure out who the phone owner was. Well, in order to test that theory, they had these fake applications. One of them was called banking. The other one was called HR salaries. And so what they actually found is once you lose your cell phone, pretty much expect that someone's going to find their way to look all the way around it. So this is where that breach notification comes into play. You know, I would frankly say that the same would be true of a laptop if someone lost their laptop or had it stolen. It's going to get probed for information. So really quite a quote here, individuals who misplace a phone or have it stolen have absolutely no hope that private information will remain private. Just a quick footnote to the study, which is interesting. There was 7%, so 93% got probed. The question is, what happened to those other 7%? They actually don't know. They could have run out of battery. They may not have ever been recovered. Some thought that they may have actually had the SIM card removed, so they couldn't test it for more information. So pretty much 100% of everyone that turned on those cell phones that picked them up saw that they were reviewed to try to grab that information. As a final slide on this section, there's a great study done by the Ponemon Institute. And what it did was it looked at the cost of data breach by industry. And so in healthcare, which is, you know, for all of us, you know, unfortunately high, it's $233 for the costs of every breach. Now, I've just done a quick calculation and said $233 by 2,000 patients is that amount, you know, it's $46,000. So the question is, what is that $233 made up of? Well, from the experience that we've had, what ends up happening is that the practice who lost the data has to pay for free credit monitoring. So at a cost of $10 to $20 to $30 per patient, they need to run a credit check to make sure that if that information was compromised, it would be found out through that credit check. What's also accommodated in that $233 is occasionally the practices that have lost that data will give special offers to try to keep their patients engaged. So it's those special offers they've sort of captured in terms of lost income or the cost of doing business. There's in-house investigations that have to occur. There's communication, as I mentioned, to all of those individuals that has to occur. And there's even a concept here of how much lost business do we expect from the breach. And all of that is kind of captured and rounded off into that $233. So it's a pretty striking number per patient. I know that most of the practices that I certainly see have 4,000 to 8,000 to 12,000, and one of the practices I came across about a year ago had about 42,000 patients that were in that practice's database. So you can do the multiplication. It's a pretty expensive process. So let's talk about now, the third reason why you shouldn't use email is that it actually lowers the standards for the practice using traditional email. And this is an interesting one for us to talk about, because we've started to hear from some of our users now that there's so much attention around privacy in North America, particularly, where patients are starting to talk about it. It's in the media every week, it seems. Either somebody's been breached, the information from Target got lost, or some practice has lost patient data, or something's happened. So in order to kind of create some differentiation for the practice, it's quite possible, and we're starting to see our practices ask for this type of information, where the practices are looking to differentiate their practice and the commitment to privacy to their patients. And so we've got some of this information that we're happy to provide to you. These are if you do end up becoming a user of Secure Mail, and you'd like this information, just enter in patient privacy in the comment section, and we'll be able to send that to you. What this information is it's enabling your practice to talk to your patients about your heightened respect or need or desire for professionalism and their privacy. So we've got in here a poster that offers your patients Secure Mail. We've got a small card here that you can give to your patients that will allow them to know where to log in. And finally, a patient privacy brochure that will talk about in plain language, some of the things that you're doing in your practice to make sure that privacy is of the utmost importance. Whoops. Now, when we talk about a better service, when we talk about trying to get a better product in order to communicate more effectively, we're really talking about a secure mail services that we offer in our company. Some of the key features are as follows. The first is we know that you don't want to change your email address. So our base system enables you to keep your current email address that you continue to receive notifications to. So your phone works. If your phone is synchronized with your email, you'll receive that email notification on your tablet, your phone, your laptop, your computer in the office. Even though you receive the notification on that email, all of that data is still secure. Secondly, we enable 500 megabyte attachments. I know that many of the labs that we work with, they're constantly getting a series of emails when someone wants to send them some patient information. Now, not only is that illegal, because they shouldn't be sending patient pictures, but it also means that they have to send 3 or 4 or 5. I've got one lab that gets 10 or 11 because they're high-resolution images. With our system, we allow up to 500 megabytes of attachments per email message. So that you can have 40 high-resolution images. You could attach a full cone beam CT scan directly into that email message, and then send that to the lab or send that to the specialist as a referral. We also have image viewing built directly into the product. You can access your secure mail in or out of the office on a tablet, on a phone, on a computer of any sort, as long as you have browser availability. And finally, and this is something that we've only recently started to talk about because we realize how it's different, we are a professional organization that's dealing with lots of other professional organizations, and we take real pride in making sure that all of you have a phone number to call if there's any issue. We spend a lot of that time on the phone helping people recover their password. We will have live chat. You can give us a call and we can help you through any sort of an issue. If you've ever tried to get Gmail on the phone or by email, you will be frustrated. So if there's ever any issue where you're having with those type of services, you're only going to get occasional support occasionally. With us, we've got a 1-800 number that would send us directly to your send you directly to our customer support team. Last slide before I do a quick demo about Secure Mail. We're often asked, well, what type of information would we want to include in protected health information? Well, when you're sending information to your patients, here's the type of things that we recognize. First of all, protected health information in appointment reminders. So although it's okay to say you have an appointment next Thursday, it's not okay to say, unless you're using Secure Mail, it's not okay to say, take this medication, don't take this medication. Treatment follow-up information, referrals from patients. So if you want to, for example, send a message, a referral to a specialist, and also copy the patient on that message, that's absolutely possible with Secure Mail. Any sort of images and x-rays that the patient's asking for, treatment consultations, prescription information, and of course patient information. Similar things with your colleagues. Examples of sensitive correspondence there are patient referrals, lab requisitions, images and x-rays, patient treatment consultation. So we've got a number of cases where where there's a radiologist involved, there's an implant surgeon involved, and the GP's involved, and of course the lab's involved. Well, there's no better way to share that information securely than a product like Secure Mail. So I'm going to take a few minutes now and just show you a very short demo about our product. All right. Now, I'm going to just start with the screen. This is a new part of our product that we're going to be releasing here in the next 30 days. And we're just going through some final finishing touches on this. This is the type of portal that your patients would be logged into. They will go to mysecure-mail.com, and they will be able to enter their own username, which is their own email address, enter in the password, and be able to log in and communicate back with the practice or the specialist who happens to be on a referral process or something. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular view of it. I'm going to show you from a professional standpoint, from a practice standpoint, what you're going to be looking at. So let's start with username and password. Right now, I'm just logged into our demonstration site. All of the patient names and doctors are all fake, because I know that we did a webinar earlier, and some people thought that we may actually be compromising protected health information by doing our demo. In any case, we've got something quite simple here. You know, quite in bold letters, we've got an inbox. We're able to compose a message and show the trashed, the items that you've discarded or anything that you've sent. I would say about as simple as email can get, with a few significant differences. So first of all, what you'll see when I look at a message is every email kind of has two parts to it. The top part, we've called an email message. Now what happens in the email message is this is the part of the email that gets sent to the recipient's normal email address. So if you've got a Gmail address, or if you've got a branded address that you use right now, this is the email that would end up in your inbox. And you can see here that there's no patient information that's being shared, other than here's the information for the patient that I was talking to you about earlier, just giving a little bit of context. Now, when the recipient sees this email, whether it be on their phone or their tablet, they will get a link inside that will now house all of the secure elements. So before they can read this, they'll click on that link, they'll come to our servers, and they'll be able to read that the patient name is John Smith, 33-year-old, non-smoker, and HIV positive. So this is the type of information that needs to be in that secure part of the process. Now I can tell you we have over 100 people joining our service every week right now, and we don't have very many support calls because it's just like email, except a few differences. Let me take a little more complex case where, again, you see the two parts. You see the email message up top, a secure mail on the bottom, and now I have a number of attachments. So what I can do with these attachments is I can view them or I can download them. If I view it, up pops up a viewer that is already inside of our software. So it doesn't have to pull up anything specific because it's all built in. One of the nice features that we've got in our software is that we enable the ability to draw arrows. So if you've got a question, and we see this actually being used quite a bit between the dentists and labs. So if there's a particular point that needs to get made or a particular question, someone can enter in this little arrow. This is the problem. Obviously, I'm not a dentist, or I would say something that was smarter there. Nevertheless, you can see how it works. And so now, this little annotation, this little marker, will show up with that picture when the lab is going to open it. And similarly, if the lab's responding back to you, they will also be able to draw a little arrow and be able to share that information with you. What takes it one step further, and we're starting to see quite a bit of use of this part of our product as well, and this is not something you're going to find in email, is that we've got the ability to show 3D images in our software. And again, there's no special download that's required, but we can start to look at all of the functionality that you'd expect in a 3D image viewer shows up automatically, and this is all included for the price of the service. So we can do some fading of that information. And if it was an implant or a more complex 3D system or more complex dental work, you'd start to see different layers. So you'd be able to see the implant here that would stand out in a different color than what we have here. But all of that's included. Now I'm just going to show you briefly that we can also compose messages pretty easily. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start typing in one of my colleagues. His name is Pierre Fauchard. What you'll notice here is that Pierre Fauchard has a picture of himself, and this is one of those things that HIPAA recommends, is that you should check those names twice. Well, we've kind of taken a slightly different approach where we actually have included a picture of the individual, and now when I type in Pierre Fauchard, of course I know Pierre, and I know that's him. So even if I had 5 Pierres, I'd be able to figure out who it was going to, making sure that was correct. We can type in the subject line, we can put in the patient's name there. I can say something here quickly that says, this is the patient that we spoke about earlier. And now I'm going to put something in the secure part of the message. I've got some demonstration images here, and I can just take these, drag and drop them into, oops. I can just drag and drop them here into our product. And you can start to see them show up here now. Whoops. Butterfingers. So you can start to see that it's a simple drag and drop. I've got those images there. And now I can type in John's details. And this is all protected health information. And I can simply hit send at that point, and it will end up in Pierre Fauchard's email box. Now getting back to the presentation, as I mentioned earlier, we've got about 11 countries that we're in now. We've got over 3,200 users and growing about 100 a week at this point. It's very, very exciting. We've got over 55,000 now patients in the system, and thousands of files per week that are going back and forth. Very, very excited about our growth. We expect to hit close to 5,000 by the end of June based on the current trajectory and the current growth. Lots of news about us this week. When we were in fact in Dental Economics, there was an article about us. You can see lots of doctors and labs here talking about us, and if you do a quick search or go to our website, you can see all the articles that have been written about us. One of the very exciting things that we're coming out with in April is a desktop tool. So most of what I showed you today, well, everything I showed you today was really a web-based tool. You saw the browser, you saw me go to a website and enter in my password. What's going to be released here at the end of April is a secure mail application, which means that it's going to look and behave just like Outlook. In fact, we're looking to replace Outlook in your practice. So what that means is it's going to integrate at some level with your practice management system. Right now, we're very confident with the work that we've done with Dentrix. We're very confident with how that's going to roll out, and we've got a number of people set up for that pilot. We're actually looking for some more people for that pilot, and we'll talk about that in my next slide. Before I get there, a couple of things about our application. We can import your contacts from your current email provider. So if they're in Outlook, if they're in Hotmail, if they're in Windows Mail or Gmail, we'll be able to put them into secure mail so that you can keep working with as little disruption as possible. Now let's talk a little bit about the pilot. Now this is our third, I think, webinar where we've talked about the pilot. In our first webinar, we thought we would ask for about 15 to 20 is what we're looking for, practices to sign up to the pilot. We were overwhelmed, actually. We got well over that, and now I think the number stands at about 140. so we moved from looking for 30 participants, 20 or 30 participants. We've got about 140. And we've decided internally that the more the merrier. The more people that are in our pilot, the better our product's going to be. Although we know how it's going to work with Dentrix, we'd like your feedback on how it works with some of the other practice management systems. And so if you're using anything other than Dentrix, and frankly if you're using Dentrix, we'd like to see you on the pilot. We'll be engaged with you during that process to find out how it's working for you and see what type of changes you'd like to see. One of those big changes, as opposed to the product you saw today, one of those big changes is that we're going to have a patients tab so that you'll be able to communicate directly with your patients, communicate directly with your colleagues, and of course all of the messages would sit there as well. The details on the pilot, I would ask you to enter in pilot in the comments section. We're going to ask you to, once you enter in pilot, we're going to email a private invitation to confirm that acceptance. We just want to make sure that we handle this outside of the normal way that people normally just go to our website, they sign up for secure mail and go through a process. We're going to handle each of these ones individually. What's going to happen once you register, once you get that private invitation, you're going to get immediate access to secure mail. And we'll be giving you 60 days free. During that 60 days, we're going to release that practice management connection that I just spoke about, and also patient communication. We're not going to charge a credit card, and you can cancel your subscription at any time. What I will ask is we will want to talk to you during that period. So if you can make some time, or your front desk staff can make time to just communicate with us and say, here's what we liked, here's what we didn't like, here's what we'd like you to improve, we're going to be all ears, and we've got a whole group of people here that'll be listening to your feedback and making sure that the product is as good as it can be. As an added benefit, what we've actually going to offer is, rather than $39 a month, we're going to reduce that amount to $29 a month plus the 2 months free. And that's for all of the people on the call today. The code that they'll be entering in, that all of you will be entering in, is Levine60. But contact us by entering in pilot into that chat window, and then we will reach out to you with those specific URLs. So with the specific codes to get into the pilot. And Dr. Levine, that's what I've got. I think we've covered a lot of information. Sure anxious to see if there's any questions about it.
Well, there are definitely questions, as there always are. So hope you
Great.
weren't planning to take up here. Just while we got that screen up, so you got the monthly fee there. Is there a setup fee or extra support fees for the secure mail, or is that it?
That's it. We've done our best to keep the fees. We've rolled it into a monthly fee, Dr. Levine, and we anticipate taking a little bit of time to set up, but because it looks and feels so much like email, I would say our typical setup's about 15 minutes, and we really don't get a lot of calls for support, but of course we're here if anyone needs.
Now that $29.99 a month, is that like a teaser rate and it goes up after a few months, or,
No.
or how long is that good for?
Thanks. I should have mentioned that. No, this is for as long as you have that account. We really, we're very thankful for the people that have come through the webinars. There are some of our best users, and that rate will continue for as long as you have the service. It's not going to go up to $39.95 or $99 rather. It will not do that.
Okay. Now, what if most offices have multiple people with multiple email addresses? Is that $30 a month for each email address?
Good question. No, that is per practice. And so the way we look at practices, and this tends to work pretty well, is there's going to be one doctor's account and 4 support. And that support account can be given to whoever in the office is used to doing that communication. So that's all included for the $29.99 a month. And we have found that that's been perfect. If it's a larger office and they've got a couple of doctors there and we want lots more other accounts, we can talk about we can talk about a bulk deal of some sort. But we've found that 90% of the practices that are joining start with the $29.99 a month, and that does plenty for them. There's no extra fees even in terms of data storage. We've included it all in that sum. There's lots of other services that we've come across that charge by message or charge by storage, so by gigabyte, and we've chosen a wholly different path, which is as much as you can eat for $29.99.
Great. I think that's a good deal. Now, if someone doesn't use practice management software right now, they probably wouldn't be a good candidate for the pilot program, but they can still use secure mail, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We've found that the practice management connection, what we've found is we're actually starting to test it against some of the image management software as well. So we're starting to work with some of the DEXA software and just testing our product, and it integrates at a light level with all of them. So we're pretty pleased with how that's going to work. So if they're using some software, or frankly, if anyone on the call really just wants to replace Outlook with something secure, then it's our software that they need.
Okay. Here's a question that maybe I'll start to answer a little bit, and you can add in a little bit whatever
sounds
I miss.
good.
Someone asked me about what exactly is a covered entity, and I actually get this question asked a lot. I think there tends to be a misconception out there that if you are not doing email e-claims, that therefore you're not a covered entity. And unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than that. There's basically 3 parts to whether you're a covered entity. The first is whether you're a healthcare provider, which you are. And the second 2 are kind of interrelated, which is do you transmit information electronically and do you conduct covered transaction. Where we have found that a lot of covered entities get kind of tripped up, even if they don't submit e-claims, is that it's not necessarily the transactions that you do, but coming to you that may affect things. For example, we've had this happen to a couple of offices where someone was not a covered entity. They called up the insurance company to say, hey, we need to get some information about this patient for benefits. They were told, hey, our systems are down, but we'll email you later on today with the information that you want. The millisecond after you got that email, you are now a covered entity, even though you had no intention of doing it. Some people use third-party billing services that they handle their billing, and they probably use electronic transactions. So if you are employing the third-party billing party and they use electronic, you're a covered entity. Some people get the insurance companies to do direct deposit. Rather than getting checks, they have direct deposits coming into their financial institution. You're now a covered entity. So that's my take on it. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Rohit.
No, that's pretty much my take as well. I think that there are very, very few organizations, that dental organizations, that wouldn't be considered covered entities at this point.
Yeah. Now you had mentioned, I know your company is really good about sending out, and you had offered to send out the notice of privacy practices and business associate agreements, things like that. What about for that email consent form? Do you have one like that, or a template that you're aware of that might be out there?
You know, we haven't. It's something that we just haven't foraged into because I happen to think it's not a good idea. And so we don't want to actually facilitate that. While it's quite possible for people to get consent, we don't think it's the right way to go. As I said, because that still leaves the practice vulnerable. I'm sure there's examples that can be found, but it's not recommended, and therefore we wouldn't want to provide that.
Okay. Now, somebody wants to get the copy of the forms that you do have, the BA agreements, the notice of privacy practices. How much do you charge for that?
Oh, that's 100% free, and all you need to do in the sidebar there, just where you asked your question, just enter in series, and we will send that to you. I think we're pretty thankful for everybody's time, and are happy to provide that information.
Great. We appreciate that. Well, what exactly is a notice of privacy practice? I mean, we hear that term, the NPP. Is it a written document? Is it supposed to go on the web as well? I mean, what exactly is that?
Yeah. So the notice of privacy practice is something that's a part of the requirements for HIPAA, and it's a document that basically tells your patients how you're going to use and share their health information. And so it's a document that should be on the wall in your practice. Some practices I know have it on their website so that people can download it. It's something that you should go through. We'll provide an example of one. And from our standpoint, once the patient has read it, they should also sign off on the fact that they've actually seen this document. It's written reasonably friendly for the patient to be able to. It's not like reading legislation, and we'll provide you with a copy of one. But it's something that really should live in your office or on your website.
Yes, yeah. So just to add to that, if people have a website, you recommend that they have it up on their website as well.
Yeah, well, I would, yes. It's another indication of a practice's commitment to that, and I think it's just it's a good practice, and it's something that I think shows the patients that you're interested in their privacy.
Okay. Now, we've had a few questions coming in about specific integrations that you may or may not be working on with SecureMail. Specific questions about SoftDent, which is CareStream, Curve Dental. I know you'd mentioned Dentrix. Are you able to share, which ones you're in the process of developing integrations with?
At this stage, what we've done is we've got a reasonably generic integration that we've seen work with a bunch of different software. But because we don't have all of those sitting in our test bed here in the software labs, we're really looking for a handful of practices that are comfortable with us trying it. So we would really encourage people to find out by doing. And if they sign up for the pilot, we'll give them our software for 60 days. And if they find it's working for them, and the CareStream product or the Curve product, if you find it's working, then great, keep using it. If it's not, we would just cancel the subscription if they didn't find the value. So we're pretty comfortable testing it. Dr. Levine, I can't tell you that I've got a full repertoire because our integration really is reasonably generic in certain cases. So we'd love the opportunity to test it with some of the audience.
Okay, great. And I would assume that the cloud-based ones are not out of the equation. That you guys are a cloud-based service. So
Exactly right.
yeah, certainly. I know Curve is not that far from where you guys are located.
No, absolutely right.
We just got some great questions here. I want to make sure we get to as many of these as we can. Here's a good one, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to get your take as well. So let's say that you do everything in your practice to be as secure as you possibly can. You're doing all the things you're supposed to. Another office sends you an email. They are not following your recommendations. It's an unsecure email. It comes into your office. You happen to read it on your laptop, and your laptop gets stolen. Are you liable at that point since that protected health information was now on your laptop?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I think there's a quick answer for that. I think that once information is in your possession, it is your responsibility. No matter if it came from a patient, if you sent it to a patient, if it came from a doctor or a lab, once it's in your possession, it's your responsibility.
Yeah. Now, I would add to that, my company, one of the things that we do is we provide encryption services for our clients. When we're talking about a lot of this stuff about the breach notification, you do have one get-out-of-jail-free card, and that's encryption. If you've encrypted your data and it gets stolen or lost, you don't have to report it if it's encrypted. Now, normally, for most offices, we're just encrypting their backup and their servers, for example. If you happen to be getting electronic protected health information on your laptop or on your computers, but through email, then you really should encrypt those as well. The good news is that it's really not all that difficult to do it. There are, if you have Windows 7 Ultimate, it's got a program called BitLocker built into it. Windows 8 and 8.1 have BitLocker built in them as well. There are free programs like TrueCrypt and AxCrypt, and there's a lot of ways to do it. If you're not comfortable, any IT company that has any knowledge of these programs can help you. We can certainly help you, but I would certainly highly encourage that any devices you have in your office that contain electronic protected health information, that normally that's going to be the server, the backup, and again, if you're getting emails, it would be your laptops and whatever computers are reading the emails. Get them encrypted. It's not all that difficult. It's not all that expensive, and it's going to, you compare the cost of doing that, which is going to probably cost you under $1,000 to do the whole office, versus, Rohit talked about some of these fines. There's 4 levels of fines for HIPAA violations, and even the lowest tier, which is that you didn't know about it and reasonably should not have known about it, you can still be charged up to $50,000. So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
What makes secure mail secure? I mean, is it the fact that nothing is actually sent? Is it just a link? Is it encrypted? What actually makes it secure?
Yeah, so we've, in the basics of the software, when we first started developing this almost 5 years ago now, we understood the HIPAA requirements. And so what makes it secure and HIPAA compliant is the fact that we do automated backups. We're fully encrypted on what they call data in motion and data at rest. We do regular testing of our full backup systems. Every logging into our system and server is managed or is logged. So every time you log into our system, every time you view an image, or whoever views those images, we've got records of those. And so auditing and auditability is one of the big requirements for HIPAA compliance, and we do that all automatically for you, so that if a patient ever comes back to you and says, some of my images I saw on Facebook, can you tell me what happened with the images that I took in your office? You would contact us. We can provide a complete log of every time that patient's information was accessed, whether it was within your practice, whether it was at the lab that you sent that information to, or whether it was a specialist or whoever else might have touched you in between, because we've got that full sort of logging and auditing. So we've got logging and auditing, automated backups, tested backups, and of course encryption. Now, when we use email, we recognize that it is not secure. And so in order to access our information, what happens is you get that link. When you click on that link, it takes you directly to our secure servers, directly to the email that was actually that you were sent. And so it's not a a big step, because all you have to do is click on the link, and then it comes up in that interface that I showed you today, and it's fully secure.
Yeah. Now, just talking about logging, can you log, for example, if someone's read a message? Is there like a message read option or return receipts? Is all that part of the system?
That's something that we're actually looking for some feedback on, Dr. Levine, and it's clearly something we have full and complete knowledge of. We know if something's been forwarded, whether it's been read, and we're just looking for some feedback from as we continue to develop the product. I think the read receipt element of it is going to be something that you see probably by the June timeframe or maybe July. We've also had requests to kind of log all forward so that people understand where all their information is where their email is going. So we have all of that built in. Right now that information isn't visible because we're looking for some feedback on it, but expect to see that one. I think that one's become something that's certainly been asked of us a number of times.
Okay. Now here's a good question. So you had mentioned the fact that a patient is not able to waive the requirement that emails between providers be sent in a secure way. Does the patient need to give you consent in order to, even if you're sending it secure, to be able to communicate with a referring office or a lab or whatever when it comes to their care?
No, they don't actually need to give you consent. Basically, the rule of thumb here is if you need to, in your practice, share that patient data for the continuation of the treatment of that patient, you don't actually need patient consent. It's seen as in the best interest of that patient for you to share that information securely with another provider. And that can be the lab or it can be another dentist.
Yeah, I think it's important to also, and you had mentioned this earlier when we talked about business associates, referring offices, labs would not be considered business associates because they are part of that continuum of care. Normally for a dental practice, the people who would qualify as your business associates would be people like me, your IT consultant, the practice
companies like ours.
Software.
Yep.
Yeah, like yours, certainly, absolutely. You have to have that in place because you have, you are accessing their emails, obviously, whether your servers are. Your accountant, your practice management consultant, the practice management software company, if they ever log into your system to do troubleshooting, they would all, you would need business associate agreements with all of them, but not referring offices. Okay, I'll just read this question as it's written here. My office is still new to Dentrix. They've only had it for about a year and a half. We're confirming appointments regularly via email and text. How would that be handled with secure mail?
It depends on the system that you're using. I think that if you're using a system like DemandForce, they have their own way of, or Smile Reminder, they have their own way of communicating, so those don't normally go through your office emails. They go through the DemandForce system. In our software, Secure Mail, you would use it just like you would use your current Outlook, if that's what you're using to communicate. You would enter the patient name in the to field. You would then enter in any non-secure information that you need to in the big email section that we had listed there, and then any secure mail, or in the secure mail section. So any private information like take this medication, don't take this medication, here are the treatment details. All of that information you can put in the secure part of it, and then send it. It'll come to their normal email address, and they'll be able to read both the secure and non-secure portions of it.
Now, I would assume the non-secure portion does not include the patient name, correct? They just get the email with the link?
That's correct, yeah. That's what I would do, for sure.
Now, someone also asked, what if someone other than the patient clicks on the secure mail link and accesses the patient's PHI? Are you liable? But there's more than just clicking. I mean, they have to enter a username and password, don't they, in order to get access within that? Yeah.
Yeah, so they have to enter a username and password, and the very first time they register their account, they actually verify that they have access or they actually verify themselves by entering their birth date, which the practice, of course, knows and enters in as well. So it's a bit of a verification that we're actually talking to the right individual. They enter in their birth date, and from that point forward, they have to enter. They get to pick their own password, and from that point forward, they have to enter in their email address and their password in order to gain access.
Great. Now, I would imagine with a system like that, you're not going to have trouble with people opening, because one of the people that asked the question said they're using a secure email type of service, not RightSquid, obviously, and some of the offices complain that they can't actually open the emails. It seems to be offices, for example, that are using GoDaddy for their web hosting. Is that something you've seen with your service, or probably not? Because again, they're just once they click the link, at that point, you're going to. It's no different than going to a secure website, correct?
That's exactly correct. Yeah, you know, we've heard lots of competing services, and the challenges can be multiple-fold, including the level of security certificate. There seems to be some issues there. There's also a question around encryption methodologies. Sometimes that comes up and can conflict, and so we've seen a number of issues come up. We haven't seen any of those with our system. Like I said, we're adding about 100 a week right now, and thousands of messages later. We don't see those issues because it is our secure servers that we're managing.
Yep. Well, we are almost out of time and almost out of questions. We are out of questions. So,
okay, great.
Rohit, I want to thank you as always. I think that these webinars are great information for people. You certainly know your stuff. I think everyone appreciates the fact that you're explaining things in lay terms, that we're not getting too technical with the HIPAA rules and regulations, but it's very obvious that, you know, most dentists do prefer to use email if they can, and that's what we're comfortable using. If you're going to do it securely. Why take the risk, and for $30 a month to have that peace of mind, and you know, eventually, as I say, one thing that Rohit hadn't mentioned, he told you that list of people that had breaches. I actually went on to the Health and Human Services website. Right now, there are 932 practices that have had to notify, they declared breaches of their data, and over 50 of those were just because of email. So it absolutely happens, and I think it's really critical that you protect yourself, and for a minimal investment each month, to have that peace of mind of knowing that this is just one, yes, it's just one part of the HIPAA puzzle that you've got to solve, but it's a big one, because certainly there's a lot of people that have been dinged for what we used to think is relatively minor issues, but with HIPAA, nothing's minor anymore. These are big deals. So thank you, Rohit. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, and we'll be able to communicate with everyone in the next few days just to get back to people. If you've got any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask during this webinar, please leave a note for either Dr. Levine or I to follow up afterwards, and we'll figure out a way of connecting with you.
Thank you. Many of you know that we do these webinars on a regular basis. For those of you who may have shown up a few minutes late, we absolutely did and do record all the webinars. You'll all, within the probably next few hours, depending on how much time I have tonight, I'll be able to get out the recording. I will also be able to send out the CE forms for all of you who are on the webinar as well. So don't worry, again, if you showed up late or didn't stay, well, if you didn't stay at the end, you're not hearing this right now, but either way, it's we recorded it. But we do these on a regular basis. We've got a couple next week that are coming up, one on treating kids on pedo. So I think we got some great topics coming up in the near future. Most of you are on the list. I think we are bringing Rohit back in about a month or so, because with HIPAA, even though they passed these omnibus rules back in the end of end of last year, they supposedly call this the final rule. As many of us who have been involved with HIPAA over the last decade know, final is never final. So there's always going to be either new laws or new interpretations or new standards of care, quote unquote, of how to deal with it, and we want to make sure people are up on this. I think it's really critical. So we want to thank Rohit for joining us this evening. We know your time is valuable. I would highly encourage you to take advantage of this great offer that Rohit has. It's 2 months free. There's no obligation here. If you're not happy with it, don't worry about it. But everyone that we know that uses their service loves it, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. So Thank you for joining us all this evening, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.